Welcome everybody to a new exciting episode of Ask Your Doctors. My name is Bonolo Mashisi and I am joined by Dr. K and our guest Basheera. So today we have an exciting lineup for you and we're discussing autism. So autism is quite an interesting condition because there's no one size fits all. Everybody presents differently. There are different behavioral patterns that we see in some of our children. So we are here to learn more about what these patterns are, so to be able to identify or associate better with people living with autism.
In case anyone is hearing the rain, we are blessed. So it might interfere with our audio a little bit, but let it rain, let it rain. And we have our guest, Basheera Surty, am I right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, sure. And she's an occupational therapist, and she will be taking us through how she deals with autism on a day-to-day basis.
So Basheera, thank you and welcome to the show. So could you kindly introduce yourself to our audience, tell us a bit about what you do, what is occupational therapy, and introduce autism to us.
And also remember, we aspire to inspire. So there might be a young person out there might be a parent watching thinking, after the show they say, aha, now my child's going to do occupational therapy. So tell us where it all began and then we take it from there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Bonolo and Dr. K, for having me on the show. It's really a passion of mine to speak about children and to speak about inclusion for children with disabilities, people with disabilities. So this is really exciting. My name is Basheera Surty, like Dr. K said, and I'm an occupational therapist. I grew up in what used to be a small town called Rustenburg, but is now quite a thriving city with all the mines. And then I moved to Cape Town, to the University of Cape Town, to study occupational therapy. It's a 4-year degree. And, you know, growing up, we didn't really know what occupational therapists do. We didn't even know they existed. We didn't know what speech therapists really did as well. So I was fortunate enough to find out from a friend of mine who had a sister who was studying OT. And how my journey started was that I was really interested in working with people, and that's something I knew I wanted to do going forward. And I was really interested in mental health as well. So I found out about OT, studied really hard as a student. I was quite a nerd, and then was fortunate enough to get into the health sciences faculty. And
Which institution was it?
University of Cape Town.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. And I studied there for 4 years and then did my community service. After that, I found myself working in pediatrics. So occupational therapy is quite broad. You can go into many different areas, you know, hand injuries or geriatrics or adults. And I found my way into pediatrics. And I've always had a passion of working with families, so really working with the parents of little ones as well.
Okay.
That sounds quite extensive. Thank you for that. And I hope somebody who's thinking of joining occupational therapist, I think maybe it's hidden and people don't see it as often as they should. And hopefully you highlight the importance of occupational therapy, especially in the context of what we are discussing today. So today we are talking about autism. Maybe if you could please just explain to our audience what is autism. Maybe somebody who doesn't quite understand, they've heard it in the media but doesn't quite know what autism is.
And the rain gets stronger.
Yes. I'll try to speak louder.
Yeah.
So autism is part of the PDD disorders, so it's the pervasive developmental disorders. And it's a spectrum. So like you mentioned earlier, there's no two people who have autism that are exactly the same. Yeah. And the main challenges with autism that people with autism face is around social skills, communication, and how they process sensory information coming in from the environment. So that impacts the way that they engage with things around them and also the way that they behave. So those are kind of the main characteristics. It's really seen in the social spaces with regards to communication and behaviors.
And you mentioned sensory, what does that mean?
So we all have our sensory systems, so we take in sensory information all the time through our bodies, using our ears, our eyes, our hands, taste, the way our bodies move. And the way children and people with autism perceive that information is differently to how typical people would perceive that information. And they're quite sensitive beings. So, for example, really bright lights that we may be able to tolerate and just experience as bright lights can be very overwhelming for someone with autism. Loud noises can be really frightening. So if we're sitting here and we hear a car driving past that's really fast and really loud, it can be really frightening and just difficult to process for a child with autism. So they're very sensitive beings. So it's almost thinking about, in a way, autism is seen as a protection for very sensitive people. And they are just like us, people with autism, they have needs, they have wants, they have desires, they have dreams, emotions as well. But this way that they process a lot of what's going on makes them seem quite different to the rest of us.
Autism and occupational therapy, what's the link? What makes OT one of the best disciplines to be dealing with autism?
So occupational therapists really look at function and how a child functions, how an adult functions in their day-to-day lives, from something as simple as putting on shoes to putting on a t-shirt to actually going out into a shopping mall or even having a job. So we really look at each individual and we see what does this individual need in order to be as independent and functional so that they can live full lives to the best of their potential and the best of their capacity. So it's really supporting them with a lot of functional tasks, so that they can have a good quality of life.
You spoke of noises and lights. I am a dentist in my full-time job, and I work with noises, drills and lights. Sure. We know very well that some people will ask you, does your practice handle autistic patients?
Yes.
The first thing we tell them is that they don't need much special handling if you are sensitive to their surroundings, but don't introduce things too quickly. Don't expect them to walk in and go through the mill like everyone else. And don't start switching on lights and start taking out drills and making noises.
Yes.
That's the first place to start.
Yes.
Be gentle, take your time, your appointment might be a little bit longer. And so we may not be experts in the field, but at least we know that don't be too loud, don't be too
pushy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, don't expect things to be too fast. Okay.
I think that's something so important that you've pointed out, Dr. K, because it's so important for spaces that we live in to accommodate for different types of people, different children with different characteristics. And what you're saying are certain tips and tools that you can put in place in your everyday life, if you are working with people who are different to yourselves. So being sensitive to sounds and the way you set up your environment and the different kinds of noises that you bring in and how you introduce it is so crucial. Children with autism as well, they love routine, they love knowing what's happening next. It gives them a sense of security. So having that, before your appointment as well, just having, we're going to do this and this and this, so they know and they prepared for what's going to happen, the sounds they're going to hear, where they're going to feel the different input on their bodies, on their faces. And it's also just about using their senses. So they work really well with visual items and calendars so that they can actually see what's coming first, second, third, fourth, and be more prepared in that way.
No, that's good. So as a parent, if I'm perhaps concerned that, my child may potentially be autistic and, displaying behaviors that I'm concerned about, what do I need to look out for, and what is the referral line? Who do I need to seek help from? How is the diagnosis actually made?
Okay. So I think what's important to highlight here is that if you are concerned about anything with regards to your child's development, it's best to consult with a health professional. So it can be an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, a doctor, someone who works in the space and in the field of childcare and child health. And the reason for that is that often a parent would have a gut feeling that something's not okay, but they'll hear from someone else, oh no, they'll outgrow it, this is just temporary, it's fine.
They're stubborn like their uncle.
Exactly, yes. Or you were just like this when you were small, you know. And the truth is, some of these incidents or some of the things that parents are picking up are not life-threatening, or doesn't mean that, this child has a disability or there's something major going on, but it does build a foundation. And those could be gaps that could be left open with regards to how a child develops. So that early intervention is really important. Just if you are concerned, reach out to someone with whatever it is that you're concerned about. And specifically for autism, what parents often notice is because most of the challenges are around communication and around social skills, from the age of 2, children become more social beings. That's when they start engaging and playing with other kids. They start saying a lot more words. They start responding to things a lot differently. So even though autism can be detected much earlier, it's often detected from between 2 to 3 years old. So if you see that your child is not responding to their name consistently, if you see that your child is not making consistent eye contact, so they're looking at you, but it's very fleeting, or they're not making eye contact at all, if you find that they're doing a lot of repetitive behaviors and they have to have things a certain way. So if the mug is there, the mug stays there and no one moves it, otherwise, it's a big tantrum, and they find that change quite overwhelming. They also have a lot of repetitive behaviors to help them regulate, because like I said earlier, they're getting a lot of sensory information in, and they need to know how to self-soothe. So sometimes you'll see a lot of hand flapping, you'll see a lot of tapping on their legs, you might see them fidgeting with a lot of things, and that's just helping them to calm down. Those are the things you can pick up. I think those are the main signs, if a parent's concerned, and these are the things you could look out for.
Autism, can you outgrow it?
You can't outgrow it, so it's a lifelong condition, but you can manage it really well, and you can still be a very functional human and person and engage in meaningful activities, even though you have autism throughout your life. In the early years, so it is a spectrum, like you said. So you get mild forms of autism, you get more people with autism that have more intense needs. So some children could be verbal, they'll be able to speak. Other children would be able to only say a few words. Then you get other children who won't be able to speak but can still communicate using images, using technology, using their hands. There's many different ways they can still engage and communicate. And that goes throughout adulthood. And because we are social beings by nature, having autism and the challenges that comes in with social engagements can become a very lonely place for a person with autism. And it's just about making sure that children and teenagers with autism are getting the support that they need in order to engage meaningfully, even if it's not verbally, but they're finding ways to connect with other people. Because you will also find as children grow older, there's an increase in anxiety, increase in depression in children and youth with autism, because they obviously are impacted in society quite negatively without things being in place that can afford them an opportunity to thrive and connect.
You've basically answered, sorry Doc, you basically answered quite a few of our upcoming social media questions, but we'll just clarify them as we go through them.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that you've highlighted the importance of, firstly, this is a lifelong condition, and the fact that it's very social, and potentially it could get lonely for for the poor children. And sometimes we focus so much on, you know, the autism, not forgetting that we need to support them in the other areas to help them connect and integrate them in schools, etc. And also the fact that it's a lifelong condition. There's obviously other issues around stigma, and how do we help break that cycle?
Yeah, sure. I think that's an important question because in the world that we're living in, we do need to be more inclusive as well. And, you know, that's not on the child or the family of the child, that's in society generally. So how do us typical individuals, you know, afford and make spaces inclusive for children with disabilities? And this is a simple product that we have as well. It's from Affirmations of the African Child, and it's basically affirmation cards for any child, but it's inclusive for all kids with disabilities. And it's also in Braille as well. Yeah. So it comes with a little card, and this is what it means to build an inclusive environment. It's to teach other children that there are kids who can't read, you know, they read by using Braille. And there are kids with different conditions. So you'll see the cards have positive affirmations on them, which each child can read. And it also has pictures of children with disabilities. So you'll see this one has a prosthetic leg, this one has vitiligo, this one's in a wheelchair. So it's really about creating spaces where children get to see, oh, there are different children in the world. Not everyone looks like me, not everyone's able to do the same things like me.
Gifted.
We are all differently gifted. So this is a powerful tool that all parents can use with their children to start welcoming other children into their spaces as well.
School dynamics, let's say my 2-year-old, I want to start doing things for them. I've picked up that there's this, so what are my options? Special schools?
Sure. So that's an important question as well, because that is such a real challenge for so many parents who have children with autism. So working at My Online Therapist, we've seen that there are many schools who do not accept children with disabilities. And this is a huge challenge because schools need to be inclusive. But we also understand that in order for a school to be inclusive, they need the right kind of supports. So there's many families all over the country who have kids with autism, and by doing online and teletherapy, our therapists are able to work with these kids in their home environment so that they are still getting forms of stimulation, forms of healthcare, forms of being able to play, learn, engage, and most importantly, they're able to connect with their families. So families are given the tools on what's needed on how to actually help these kids be included in society, so that when they do go to an ECD center, when they do go to a primary school, the primary school's more open to having them included, and the parents are also more aware of what works for my child, what doesn't work for my child, what needs to be put in place to support my child to play and to learn. And there are some organizations like Autism SA on their website. They have a lot of schools all over the country, government schools and private schools that people with autism can access, children with autism can access. And in Gauteng, we have Bella Vista, which is a lovely school for kids with autism or on the spectrum. And we also have a school, the Joburg School of Autism, which is also a wonderful space for children with more severe needs, autistic needs.
But let's say someone is in the outskirts, out in the Bundus, where Bonolo and I come from.
Yes.
It's very brilliant what you are saying. You're saying I can have a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
And then we're watching TV, and then on the other side we're playing with you.
Definitely, definitely. And I worked with a child and family last year doing teletherapy where I was on the screen, and mum and child would basically be therapist and child. The mum and child had no access. She had to drive an hour out to access a school, to access a therapist. But now it was in her home, and we could have monthly sessions with the whole family together. We could help her set up her home space, because we were in the home. We know what the lounge looks like. We know what the kitchen looks like. We know what resources can be included to help this child who has very severe sensory needs. Types of swings that can be included, what can the outside garden be used for. So there's a lot of potential for teletherapy and just reaching kids who would ordinarily not have access to
So it means the younger the
therapist.
child, you can put more emphasis on investing in the infrastructure within the small home that they have to turn it into a coping environment.
Totally, definitely. And the parents play and the caregivers play a crucial role, because they are the ones who are with the therapist, with the child every day. The therapist would see the child once a week if they're lucky. So it's really about handing over those skills and, you know, really working with the parents as advocates, you know, to get into different schools, ECD centers, how to support their child to have a meaningful life as well.
Okay.
No, I'm quite intrigued. Honestly,
Yeah,
I could have this conversation for like a very long time, and I have so many questions, unfortunately. But I am interested in your tool that you just showed us. Where can someone, is it available for,
Yes,
for
it's
everyone? Where do you get that?
Definitely available. You can find it. We are on social media, but it's also affirmationsfortheafricanchild.org. That's the website, and you can place an order. There's also calendars. We're also starting coloring books. So there's a lot of resources that can build inclusion for African kids as well.
Doc, do you have any COVID updates that we go viral?
Yes, I think there was a question. One of our viewers, K's underscore M's. So they were asking about the psychology around anti-vaxxers, right? And what the thoughts are behind maybe the low numbers of people actually going forth in South Africa getting the vaccine.
The answer is speculative because you cannot be in their minds, but you know more or less what's been. You can throw some questions there as well because.
Yeah, and it was a very interesting question. I thought because I mean the word anti-vaxxers has been with us for as long as the pandemic has been almost. But it's not as simple as what is the psychology, unfortunately. A lot of things come into play.
But what are the dynamics? The most common ones, 2 or 3 dynamics
you know,
involved.
People are still scared around safety of the vaccines. People are still getting wrong information from, you know, wrong sources. People some of them are actually lacking trust in our government. So some people, you know, just don't want to because of, you know, religious purposes as well. So there are a lot of dynamics. So it's not almost like it's related to the psychology.
Okay, based on your science then, I'm sure you will agree with me. There are evidence-based cases of side effects. Before you answer it, is it worth the trouble? Are the side effects so few and far between that it's still worth vaccinating anyway?
Definitely, I think
The
risk.
adverse cases that happened, can you elaborate?
You know, whenever you reach or seek out to do a medical intervention, be it a treatment, a vaccine, there's always a balance between the risk and the benefit. There will always be side effects, there will always be adverse events, but the benefits is what we're looking for, and they always almost certainly outweigh the risks. So I'm for it.
The current dynamics, you think we're going to lose the masks?
I mean, the regulations have changed that we keep indoors and outdoor masks should be dropped. I think that's a good move for now because we're still evolving in the pandemic and it's too soon in the stage of where we are at now to drop everything all at once because we might go back to where we were. We don't want to risk that.
Okay, I'm happy. I knew the answer would be all over the place because you can't really tell what's going on. Yeah. Anyways, Basheera, is there any stuff out there that you want our audience to know about? that we're not asking you in the questions?
I think just because it is the month of autism, and the theme for this year is quality, inclusive education for all. Just, you know, for people who are in schools, who are working in schools, and who own schools and ECD centers, to be aware of the different children that are in the communities and to keep your doors open. And we know that it can be scary, you know, to have a child who is differently abled. If you've never worked with them before, you may have a lot of questions, but we are available to support and to reach out. So, you know, they can also feel free to contact my online therapist. We can show them how to support these kids in these centers and really just, you know, work on creating an inclusive world as well.
Does diet play a role?
Yeah, I was going to ask some of the myths maybe as well, in addition to the diets. Have you heard about autism?
So I think diet generally plays a role in general health care. So it would be the same for kids with autism as well. Because they process information a lot differently to us, and they are more prone to things like depression and anxiety, the types of food that they consume would just, you know, could aggravate whatever it is that they're going through.
Sugar maybe?
Sugar, yeah. So sugar is a
It
big
drives me
thing.
crazy.
Yes, no, it drives everyone crazy. That's for sure. So yeah, definitely sugar is a big one, I would say. Caffeine, as well as, you know, children grow older and the coffees that they take in, that's also a big thing to keep in mind. And I think, I mean, I'm not a dietitian, but from that angle, I think those are the two important things.
Just as Doc, you may or may not know about this, there's a program on TV that puts a very positive spin on a doctor that's autistic. I don't know if you've seen it.
The Good Doctor.
No, there's another one. I saw it by just mistake. Someone in the house was watching it.
No.
There's a guy that's qualified as a doctor, and because of his different abilities as a very sensitive autistic person, they get to sense things that other doctors cannot pick up. Look, it's fiction, but I think it's a positive spin. We can do with stuff like that, yeah.
Definitely.
And it's good to show that in integrating, you know, people think, you know, we can limit people with autistic you know, disorders, and it's good to have something like that where you
We
can
are differently gifted.
Yeah.
Yes, and having autism doesn't mean you have an intellectual challenge or disability as well. So often, because of a communication difficulty, people assume that this child cannot talk, or, you know, he's stupid, he doesn't understand anything, and they even start talking negatively about the child while the child is there. But it's important to remember these kids hear, they feel, they understand. The only struggle is the expression. So how do we support them to express what they are actually experiencing? And to be patient and to listen when working with children is really important as well.
So before we go, and thank you so much for this, I think a lot more could be said in terms of how we can better or improve ourselves as people in aiding our families and our communities with children with autism. So before you go, so you've mentioned about your availability online. How else can people reach you? You know, do you have a practice where people can
Yeah, sure. So it's a teletherapy practice. We are online. We're called My Online Therapist. And we have a website, myonlinetherapist.co.za. You can just email us. We can do a consult with you to find out what your needs are and what kind of therapy can support you. We have an incredible team of speech therapists, occupational therapists, play therapists, and counselors. We focus a lot on mental health as well. And yeah, we're here to support and serve and improve access to therapy. So you can find us on social media as well. It's my.online.therapist. Yeah.
And guys, remember that all our guest specialists are found on our website. It's askyourdoctors.co.za. Go to the button that says find a doctor. So we've got all kinds of guests there, fitness enthusiasts, and you can go back to our old footage. You will find something you're looking for, and also Basheera's information will be uploaded on our website, so you can find it reliably there. And while you're on YouTube, remember to share, like. We don't mind you sharing our content. It's good, it's free to the audience. And remember to subscribe so that you are always the first one to get notifications when the next episode comes up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank
Thank you.